Okay, here we go again. So recently, a package came in the mail, and you know how I get really excited when I get a new package in the mail that's got some book in it. But this package came from England, and I ordered it like 2 months or more ago, towards like more the beginning of the Corona crisis. And I totally even forgot that I had ordered this book, and here's why. I told you guys that I was going to be reviewing some early Gothic literature on this channel, and I've already reviewed 2 of the earliest Gothic novels. And the biggest author of the Gothic genre in the 1700s was Ann Radcliffe. And I've been reading, as you remember, the Oxford English Classics versions of these Gothic tales. So I looked up Ann Radcliffe, and I was going to start with like the first Ann Radcliffe book and see like when she started. Well, Oxford World Classics publishes 4 of her 6 books, but they published like the middle 4 books that were popular. Now, back in the day, they used to publish, I think, all of them, or maybe all but the last one, which was published like posthumously, as they say, like after she died. So the original book, the OG Ann Radcliffe book, Oxford World Classics doesn't put out anymore. So I bought like a vintage copy. And I bought a vintage copy, and it was coming from England. And this was printed in like 1995. It's coming from England. I ordered it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, it'll be here in a couple weeks or something. Like, there's planes, they fly over the ocean. It's not like Titanic days where you gotta take a ship or something. Like, this will get here eventually. I paid X number of dollars for shipping. It'll come. Didn't come. I like forgot about it. Like, totally didn't even remember. And then it shows up. It shows up, and it's this tiny little book. And if you thought Castle of Otranto was short, welcome to the first book by Ann Radcliffe. This is like a mini Gothic novel. This thing is even more in novella territory. With all the notes and everything, it's 118 pages. But like the pages are like small. So like this is by far the shortest book of the books that I've reviewed, and the other books were real short. Ann Radcliffe actually went on to start writing much longer novels. I think each one that she wrote up into her masterpiece, The Mysteries of Udolpho, were longer and longer and longer. But we'll start out with this short little novella. Now you can see it is World Classics, it is Oxford, but it's like the old ones that they published in the 90s. It's got that weird yellow and blue look. I've got, here's a comparison. This is a totally different book, The Monk, which I'm going to be reviewing next. These 2 also didn't like each other, so there's going to be more conflict between Gothic authors. Aren't you guys excited for all this Gothic juicy tea we're spilling? So you can see kind of the difference between the books that Oxford publishes now and back then, this new format, the new color scheme of the white and red. This is kind of any modern edition that you'll get in like the last 20 years. This is one was from like the 90s, maybe back into the 70s. So without chewing through too much time, without talking about the book is called The Castles of Athlin and Dunbayne, and it is referred to in the title page, I think, as a Highland story. Yeah, a Highland story. So not a Gothic story, a Highland story. This was written in 1789, so it's the most modern of the books that I've reviewed, because the other ones were from the 1760s and 1770s, so we're skipping to the 1780s now. Woohoo! As I said, Ann Radcliffe went on to be like the most successful like authoress of her day. They even just called her the authoress, like the authoress as in like the female version of an author. Like that was like one of her like nicknames. If you said the female author, everyone knew who you were talking about. You were talking about Ann Radcliffe. She was Jane Austen, like before Jane Austen was Jane Austen, like she was like the female author of her day. Jane Austen read her famously, was inspired to write Northanger Abbey, one of my favorite books, by reading tales of written by Ann Radcliffe. Mostly Mysteries of Udolpho is like a huge book. It's like her #1 book. It was kind of like the height of her success. And then after writing 5 successful books, the last couple of which were massive bestsellers, in a period of 7 years, she just kind of disappeared. So this is like one of the least read of her books because it's not currently in print from one of the major like presses. Like I don't think Penguin has a version of this right now. Of course, you can get it on Kindle for free, I'm pretty sure. And there's also like free audiobook versions on LibriVox and on YouTube. And actually, maybe down below, I'll link a version of one of the free audiobooks versions that's on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description below. Was this enjoyable by modern standards? So I've already talked about the literary significance of being the first novel by like one of the greatest Gothic writers of her time period. You know what? I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this a lot. I kind of didn't want to because the style Ann Radcliffe employs later on drives me crazy, where she tried to explain away everything supernatural, and nothing really supernatural in this happens. Everything is explained in kind of a rational way. There's not like this terrible mystery where somebody is, not the heir of this or not the heir of that. The person that you meet that is a peasant, like, it's not like a ghost, it's like revealing their fortune. And the main character, he just is the Lord's son, and he always has been the Lord's son. So it's kind of more like his tag-along guy is the guy who's like been wronged and is actually a lord. So that trope is still there, but it's like kind of the secondary character. The conflict in this is set in Scotland between two families. And like I said, it's involves some murder, but like the murder has already happened. So at the start of the book, the Baron of Dunbayne has killed the Earl of Athlin. And so there's already like this conflict in that, the Baron is kind of this illegitimate guy who's a brute who lives in his castle, and his family has always played second fiddle to the noble family from the castle of Athlin. Except for a generation ago, he basically came upon this guy, and like there was an opportunity for him to assassinate his rival, and he took it. And now, a generation later, the son of the slain lord, Osbert, he wants revenge. And he's being held back in his desire for revenge by his mother and sister, mostly by his mother, because she doesn't want to see her son killed by this terrible baron who already like murdered her husband. And he doesn't want to put his mother through the emotional stress that this is going to cause her if he decides to go to war against the castle of Dunbayne and try to revenge himself on the Baron. But at the same time, his noble heart beats to avenge his slain father. So there's an internal conflict kind of going on with the characters that's a little bit more psychologically realistic than a lot of what was going on in the other two Gothic novels that I reviewed earlier. I think Ann Radcliffe has like more insight into the human heart a little bit, because it does show people being torn in different directions, even with the villains. It's like, oh, well, he wants to do this guy, and it's like, oh, but then he could use him as a pawn in his other scheme, so he's kind of torn apart on what to do. Like, the guards at the castle are kind of like, well, our master's horrible, maybe we should betray him, but like, maybe we shouldn't do it, like maybe we should stay loyal to him. Should we act out of fear? Should we join this other group? It's interesting that the characters seem more emotionally dynamic. Even just like a few decades later, the writing style has changed to be more dynamic characters. Now, they're probably not super dynamic by modern standards, but I found the adventure to be kind of more exciting in this. There are similar things that happen in this book to some of the other Gothic literature that I've been reading, but it seems to be a little bit more, there's just a little bit more exciting. Like when they do their escapes through their tunnels and everything, it does seem to be like a little bit more gripping. Now, sometimes Ann Radcliffe's descriptions of things go on too long. Like she's describing room after room that they've got to figure out through their escape, and describing the tunnels and the passages and the things that they're going to do to escape, like in immense detail in a very short novel. So it starts to get bogged down a little bit. It's like, yep, they're totally going to find a way out of this hole, page after page after page of this. Now, her descriptions of like the castles and the nature in Scotland and the Highland setting, the ocean, the battered rocks, and the castles and the caves that are underneath, and these entrances and these valleys, and this is all very scenic and very beautiful and goes into what we call the sublime. And I think that there was not a lot of the sublime in the last few novels that I've read, but in this, I think that Ann Radcliffe's power as an authoress to describe these things was more compelling than some of the earlier Gothic literature. And so this book definitely showed that there was like a new talent arriving on the scene. It's not terribly Gothic. I would call it more of like a romance, like a medieval romance, you know, set in Scotland. That's the other thing. So normally Gothic fiction is like heavily like on the European continent based, and this is not set in Germany or Italy and Spain. It's set in Scotland. So of the 3 novels that I've reviewed so far, like actually like one is set in England and one's set in Scotland. So kind of like maybe shows that trend to be a little bit like overdone. Like actually maybe it wasn't until later that was established that they had to be set in like Italy or Spain or something like that. So I would say, actually, is this worth a read for a modern reader? Like, yeah, maybe. This is probably the hardest of the books to find so far. But Ann Radcliffe is a major author who wrote 6 books, and they were huge bestsellers. Probably Mysteries of Udolpho is something that would get assigned in a lot of English classes if you go to university. This is like a fun little read if you like things that are like, I don't know, like Outlander or something like that. That's set in the Scottish Highlands in the 1700s. Like, I don't know, maybe you would like to read something like this. As far as horror goes, it's not that great. But as far as like an adventure story goes, it's a fun little read. I mean, if you have to order it from England and wait 2 months for it to arrive, it's probably not worth it. But actually, if you want like a fun early like 1700s like adventure story, it's a pretty good one. And the characters, I would say, feel more human and more realized than some of the other early Gothic novels. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun stuff in there with sword fights and stuff. You know, it's got all the sentimental, romantic stuff. If you can't stand that, why even watching this? That's what I'm talking about. So I actually would recommend this as a better starting point than the more supernatural books that I've been talking about, because the action and the adventure in this is more fun. It was a very quick read. I never felt myself getting like too bored when they were trying to escape from the tunnels for page after page. I was like, hurry up, just escape. I know you're going to get out. Like, just stop it. But more interesting characters, a fun little adventure story. I enjoyed it. It's not going to rock my world because, you know, I'm more into like the horror side of things. But I think that if you were interested in this time period and the writing, especially checking out some female authors, and seeing like what their early works were like. Ann Radcliffe went on to be a tremendously successful author, and this was a pretty short little novella to introduce you to her writing. So if you like this, maybe you could read this as a tester and then say, oh yeah, I like her writing. Maybe I'll check out, you know, some of her longer stories like The Italian or The Mysteries of Udolpho. So I recommend this as a fun little adventure read, or as someone who's interested in the origins of the Gothic. Thanks for checking out this video, guys. Maybe I have more books from England coming that I've forgotten about. That'll be cool. If a mysterious package from England shows up, I'll open it up and see what's inside. Until then, guys, I've got some more Gothic fiction to review, and I've been reading a few historical books, too. Not historical fiction, but actually books of history about medieval Spain. So we're going to be talking about those on the channel soon. Click like, subscribe, bells, all of those things. Hope to see you again soon. Leave me a comment and take care of yourself, guys. Thanks.